Then there's the issue of the compatibility of media and file formats. We're used to a variety of file formats today when we're conducting our work, when we're word processing or sending a PDF, whatever it is. Now, many of these did not actually exist until relatively recently, and new hardware and software designed to read such formats are being produced all the time, but they've always got this inherent obsolescence. They may not be around forever. The recent disappearance of VHS from the shelves of high street stores is a reminder of the short lifespan of our storage media in the transition from analogue to digital. But cloud-based storage is gradually replacing external hard drives and rewritable CDs and DVDs. This phenomenon Dewey terms, and I quote, an archive with a dead interface, or without any available interface, end quote. For the researcher, this poses a number of problems. Many card catalogues or printed editions of records or transcriptions have been in use for decades and probably continue to be used as well. But where will the scholarly outputs of the service and materials that we've put together of the academic archive project be in 5, 10 or 15 years from now? Will these data be readable at all? Who will care for them in the short, medium and long term? So by way of conclusion, the three challenges that I've outlined in the final part of this presentation suggest that researchers today must develop a keen awareness of authorship, ownership, copyright, and limitations of digital media to be able to advance their work. Now, Melissa Terras has recently noted, and I quote, as it says on screen here, as well as looking forward to the future and new technologies, we, DH, digital humanities practitioners, must be our own archivists. Although Terras still employs the language of professionalism, she makes a very good point that those who practice digital humanities, and to be honest, I'm of the opinion that we all do to some extent, require a range of skills associated with more than one profession and to reflect on their working methods. To do this, researchers must move beyond defining who they are and start to focus on what they do, how they do it, and why. It's been most encouraging that over the course of these 2 days, we witnessed not only many fruitful exchanges between participants and workshop leaders, but a rich back channel of tweets, retweets, blog posts, links, photographs, some of them embarrassing, some of them not, that in themselves form an archive of collaborative skills development. I mean, that's kind of what's happening. It's to this that I'll now turn to summarise some of the key points from our event. And I'm going to stop there for my talking at you bit. Thank you very much.
Say, this PowerPoint will be going online, so you don't have to try and write down all that. I'm looking forward to the references.
Anyway, that's my details. But I'm happy to take on that, any questions about that presentation first, and then maybe get on to some of the summary, and also have a look at the Twitter feed, because I want to have that in the background as well. So, yeah, does anybody have any suggestions, questions, concerns?
So I did want to say thank you for raising the issue of the fragile file format, because it's something we haven't discussed yet over the weekend, and it is actually hugely important, this idea that somehow you're making something timeless by digitising it. That this idea that it's maybe not an act of preservation if what you're preserving upon, has its own obsolescence. And I'm just thinking about microfiche. Who's had to go and look at something like microfiche? Is that how long will be able to do that for? And I'm sure when that was first announced, it's considered to be this great new storage method. So thank you for raising that as an issue.
I'm terrified.
They definitely last more than 2 years. I've got CDs of stuff that are older than 2 years.
Yeah, I mean, it's...
Maybe that's the kind of worst case scenario lifespan.
It may well be. I did read somewhere that there was a difference between CDs or DVDs that are part of kind of mass-produced multi-packs of writable or rewritable media that you just stick in the drive and save it to. Which often you'll find like a certain percentage of 100 discs that you buy, like 10 of them don't work. So, But the other thing is that the commercially produced media are actually tend to be of a slightly higher standard. So, don't worry that your DVD collection is going to fail you.
No, I was more thinking about the ones that are things that I've downloaded and stored, but things
Yes.
like photographs and things where I've definitely got ones that go back longer than that, but appreciate the fact that they're not going to last forever.
Yeah, I mean, even external hard drives, and my colleague at UEA, who's been doing a lot of work on sort of future-proofing collections, image collections particularly, did quote, I can't remember off the top of my head, but did quote a quite scary figure for external hard drives as well, which is definitely less than 10 years.
Yeah. It's about 5 years.
So it is. I mean, I've got 2 sitting in my drawer at home with all this material on, and I think maybe I should check that. Maybe have a look at them to see if they're still working. But it is. It's just something to bear in mind, especially when Naomi Corn was talking earlier about the kind of risk management, and that also extends, I think, to the kinds of physical.
I think also it's that thing about putting stuff online as well. So in the British Library's got this project now to archive websites or
Yes.
archive web pages.
Yes,
Because
indeed.
the same thing kind of applies, that we've assumed that once it's there forever, but actually loads of stuff disappears every day as you find when you try to get something off a favourite website. So it kind of, but the implications of that in terms of the size of the problem
Yes.
is
The challenge.
massive. Yeah, sorry, yes. The size of the challenge.
Great. Any further questions?
Well, I didn't get exactly what you mean with
Custodialism. Yeah. It strips off the tongue, doesn't it?
No.
Okay, so
Can you?
I'll go back a little bit to my bit, I guess. It was, just a bit of background to it first of all. It was first suggested at a Society of American Archivists conference for 1980. It was actually published in 1981, where this individual suggested at an address that with technology at the state it was in the early 80s, that there would be a point where the material traditionally in the care of institutions would be much more widely available. It would move beyond the walls of the institutions or beyond ways of kind of curation and keeping. And that with that, there would be certain, and it's mostly through digital surrogacy that this has happened, instantaneous access to all that material and a certain amount of empowerment of the wider public and communities to do things with that material, so distribute it in particular ways. And it was actually very forward thinking because it was way before most people were thinking about the impacts. I mean, this is very early days, computers were being used to record information and they were being used to sort of encode information about catalogues. But this was before our understanding of what became known as the internet and the web actually came into being. So it's through this digital surrogacy today and our on-demand existence that actually this prediction of this post-custodial era has actually started. In fact, you might say that the copyright issues that have been addressed by Naomi very well today, it's post-custodialism in a way that kind of extends beyond institutions. It also extends to all sorts of things that we produce as copyright holders, I guess. So does that kind of explain?
Yeah,
Yeah.
more or less.
Yeah.
So it basically has to do with the function of the archive.
Yeah. I mean,
The social function of the archive.
Yes.
Just a comment, Matthew. I mean, a lot of us, a lot of us who work with archives, who work with, for example, letters and first drafts of novels and all of the editing and corrections and conversation that is undertaken by the author and by the publishing editors and all that kind of stuff. We're finding a sincere problem. Given that most novels are now typed up and cut and pasted, right? And they're selecting whole swathes and just dumping it in the recycle bin. And yes, I mean, you know, for example, the author that I write on, Dennis Cooper, I mean, his most recent novel, I believe, was all written on PC, and he said it's the very first time he's ever done that, you know. But I think I mean, that's just to raise that point, and I think that's maybe an issue or a challenge that we have to kind of confront. But there are some steps being taken to address that. For example, in the Bibliothèque Nationale de France, they're actually taking the work of this avant-gardist Pierre Guyota, and they go around to his house like every week, and with a USB stick, seriously, with a USB key, download all of the information that he's like typed up, all of his text messages, everything that pertains to his work, and just archiving it. And then they'll come around the next week and have that. So, I mean, you know, there are certain, I mean, because of that, the vastness of potential storage, right? This can all be done. I mean, but if anybody wants to go through that, is a separate matter, isn't it?
I have an interesting question. Who keeps drafts of their PhD project? Do you?
I do, obsessively, to the extent that I have to sort everything by date so I even know what one I'm supposed to be working on.
Do most people do that? Keep information?
I've still got all my paper drafts and all the comments on them.
Oh, yeah,
One day I'll...
Pretty much that's what draft first.
Yes, another issue that I'm thinking is that we are working in archives, and this this today's workshop was actually after the archive. But actually, what is the future archive? You know, we are working with letters, correspondence. I'm working in 1950s, where people used to write letters. Now it's all emails. You know, it's all email correspondence. Like, even in future researchers, like even their work, their research would be so different. And would it be any sense to archive any personal emails or Gmail, you know, or like bigger projects? But of course there's issues for data protection, copyrights, and I guess terrible issues. But still, it's sort of this technology and digital. Even I feel that we can lose lots of information like for future, especially now all students that have academic emails, you know, and I'm receiving per day 20 emails, you know, I'm deleting them. Like all this information, what will happen? So it's not a question, it's observation.
It's a very good observation. I mean, it actually chimes quite nicely with the Don't's comment there about the approach in France to this kind of weekly archiving thing, because it's I mean, it's one of the books I was reading in preparation for this is a book called Digital Cultures by Abdouaï, and it was published in French initially, and it was recently translated into English. And one of the chapters there is this problem about the archives of the future and how we've entered an era where probably for the first time human beings have been going about their daily information production business, okay, but they've almost stopped leaving traces in the process. So the kind of correspondence you're talking about with emails, or the kinds of edits that we're talking about them with you know, early drafts of things. It's almost an impoverished archive, which sounds curious given that we've got the ability to store so much. But as you say, it's so easy to delete an email. It's so easy to clear your inbox because there's a big red light flashing there saying, your university saying, you know, your inbox is almost full. Please get rid of it. No matter how much you kind of archive stuff locally to your hard drive or your network space, it's you're still kind of under pressure to actually get rid of material. So yeah, it is a big challenge. So how we go about that? I'd encourage people to keep their emails.
Well, I suppose if you use Gmail, you don't have to delete things. You know, it's just an ever-growing kind of space.
Yeah, because they increase the storage capacity, don't they?
Yeah. So maybe people who use Gmail will have a much bigger kind of footprint.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, you know, along these lines of, you know, the digital, you know, fragility and everything, you know, because all of these things end up being housed somewhere, you know, whether it's in a data center or something. and those aren't, invulnerable to glitches or changes or failures or whatever. When you're dealing with, if you're, let's say, dealing with a community archive and trying to talk them into moving towards digitalization, I was just wondering if you have any knowledge or experience of at what point does that infrastructure become the infrastructure that needs to be created to house a digital archive? At what point might that kind of exceed the ability of a community archive to afford it or to care for it? Do you know what I'm saying? If there needs to be a data center linked to it, or over time, at what point does the scale just become beyond?
Yeah, I mean that's again a very serious practical problem. I mean, community archives there's been quite a lot of publications recently on community archive projects, and they tended to be quite, particularly if you're talking about local communities or small community groups. The amount of materials being produced or digitized is sort of manageable on a local level. So now we have enough kind of portable storage, or it can be run with an organisation like a local council perhaps, or a local archive record service that would actually put some resourcing into housing that data. But there is a tipping point. So that, of course, if community archiving is not just static, you don't just say, okay, well, we're only going to archive stuff for the last 3 years. If it's a real archive, it has to be added to. Right? I mean, you create more and more material, and there then is the point where someone has to step in, either from the private sector or the public sector, to do something about that material. And I haven't yet seen examples where there's been a sort of an agreement that it's going to be taken on by somebody to pay for the infrastructure to house it in the future. So I'd be very interested if anybody has any particular community archive projects that's grown to that point. Yeah, they're grown to that. I would say that they're probably at the moment small enough that they don't need the larger infrastructures, but again, it does bring us to the issue of who owns it or who's actually storing the information. So thank you, it's very good. Okay. If there's no further questions, I'm going to put Twitter on the screen because actually that's more interesting than me, so I'm going to do that. I was sitting earlier this afternoon and I scrolled right down to the start of on the 27th of October, actually, apparently it was the first tweet, and I was thinking, how can we think about this back channel information? Because actually, this is one, aside from one conference I went to a year or two ago run by VTI about postgraduate research and early career researchers. This is the first time I've been at an event like this where people have been frantically sending messages and retweeting things and posting up photographs about what they thought was happening and what they enjoyed or what they thought was thought-provoking. So I thought it might be quite nice to actually scroll through some of these, and hopefully I won't embarrass anybody in the room, but I've got stuff on here as well. But there was some really interesting things that stood out to me that struck people, and I always find it quite difficult to think of when we're paying attention to something that's going on in a workshop or a lecture. The idea that your attention has to be split between producing responses and actually actively listening to what's happening. But I find that some of these things are actually quite useful because they indicate what sticks in people's minds the most, or what strikes them at that particular moment. So I might encourage perhaps some people to shout out if they think that actually that's irrelevant or it's been answered in the course of the last 2 days. But I'm going to have a scroll through. Okay, so we've got, we'll move forward a little bit to the start of our event. It was nice to see people kind of already getting quite excited about their hopes for the weekend. There's a lot of looking forward going on. I don't know whether they've had a particularly, sort of difficult week and were desperate to get away from whatever it was that they were doing. But it was really quite reassuring to see that people were really
building up their hopes for this. And actually, one of the things I would like to ask you as a maybe jointly is why you think that is the case. Why? I mean, yeah, you can look forward to many things, but I just want to know why do people look forward to this event? I mean, what was it that kind of, you know, seeing people? Okay. Always a good one. Yeah.
Well, for me it was very clear. I wanted good advice on copyright because I have been attended another copyright sessions and I have been hearing that it's difficult, we don't know exactly, better keep quiet, we don't know, but I really feel that I have a direction to work towards, and I feel that, yes, there's still lots of way for me to go, many questions, but at least I have from where to start.
Right.
So that's wonderful to me. Like, that's really, and it was extremely interesting to meet other people who are working in other countries as well, like in Spain. Like we had yes, and sort of to contrast and compare my experience with some other people, which was very interesting actually. And it's all a childhood experience, which is great, and not only PhD experience, because in my college I meet people who are doing PhD, but still we can talk about this process, but this is much more specific to say.
Yeah.
Part of my PhD is archival work, so it's great.
That's really good to hear. That's really very encouraging. Does anybody else have a response to that?
It was quite nice to get out of the nitty-gritty of like specific archival documents, because you get so bogged down in your research and your exact chapter that you're writing and the tiny details, and to have the sort of permission to be allowed to think about bigger things like the archive and things like projects other than the thesis is quite nice to have an official route to do that you can say to your supervisor, hey, I've got this thing, and they have to let you know.
It's a training.
Yeah, it's a really nice sort of way to think about it and give yourself all the time to do that.
I think also I would follow on from that. It's sort of I'm an only just but OU student, and by definition you're outside stuff, and it's really brilliant for me to put the work that I've been doing in the context of other PhD students, other universities, because there are so many commonalities, but there are also areas of difference, and it's really helpful talking to people and comparing notes and just things about I've realised, for example, that I've actually got more confidence about what I'm doing than I thought I had. That might sound ridiculous, but talking to other people and they're going, yeah, you're doing it, and I'm thinking, oh yes, I am doing it, and I can, and it's that sort of stuff which is just so valuable, certainly to me, and it's been great from that point of view. I don't know whether other people would agree with that, but it really does help from that point of view. So thank you very much.
I thought what I might do is actually I'll pick up on a few of the speakers and contributors that we've had over the week and try and just review some of the points that came up yesterday and today. And I know that some of this came up with the afternoon discussion after the hot seating event, so we might go over some of those again. But I'm just picking up on Philip, who seems to be quite a prolific tweeter, I guess. He was also looking forward to coming with him, and I think you'll agree it was really refreshing to see a face from an organisation which is so influential and so important for the work that we do in this country. And a few things struck me as quite. I don't know. I mean, the kind of messages were quite strong. One was the public good and power of knowledge. I thought this was quite an interesting concept because it's one that, again, has a tendency to problematise these things. We might be somewhat sceptical of the good that we're doing in the world, or the good that certain projects are able to do in the world. But it was actually very reassuring to see some concrete examples of very successful projects and to have them explained to us. And I think that to me was quite a revelation, although see a lot of AHRC information coming through, to actually go away and have a look at those websites and to actually look at what they've been achieved. It really provides a benchmark and kind of models of how we can move forward. The other thing was, which we may or may not have touched on a bit, but it kind of relates to another collaborative skills project, and that's the engagement with the media and kind of leveraging or influencing the media as well. So, something that Philip mentioned only quite briefly, I think, but it's how the research that we do changes the way that the media generally respond to research activities in universities, and also those kind of contacts or partnerships with libraries, archives, museums.